What's up, guys? We are doing another reaction video today. I think I'm going to start doing more of these. I think they are more likely to get new people in the channel, to spread the gospel, so to speak. And frankly, I think they're fun. The time as a quality, the psychic temporicity of me doing these are fun. But don't worry, I'm still going to be doing my Gebser videos. You'll get one later tonight. I'm still going to be doing my other sort of theoretical backbone videos. Those will be fine, but I'm going to do some more reaction videos. I think they're fun and I think they're insightful. Okay, so today we're going to be reacting to Alex O'Connor and Destiny. Now, these are two rationalists having a rationalist discussion about whether ethics can ever be objective. So today we're going to be getting into being, we're going to get into Heidegger, we're going to get into Gebser, we're going to get into rationalism, and we're going to try to offer some insights, hopefully, to see where these guys went wrong, at least in my opinion. These guys, at least Alex, I don't like Destiny, but at least Alex is more intelligent than I am. He's more knowledgeable than I am. I don't really care about being seen as like the smartest philosophy guy out there. I don't have an academic degree or anything. This is just my own opinion. So I guess what I'm saying is don't take this too seriously. Like I know I pissed off some of the Alex O'Connor fans in some of my Kill Rationalism videos. You're going to be okay. You're a rationalist. Okay, before we do that though, we are going to read from Martin Heidegger's History of the Concept of Time. We're only going to read a page or two, so don't worry. But this is a very good book. I'm only a little over 30 pages in, and it is excellent. It is excellent. You have to read this. And if you are a fan of my Gebser work, please read this. This is such a great compliment to Gebser. So, we're going to read this, and I want you to kind of just keep this in the back of your mind as we play this video. Okay. So, picking up with Heidegger. Quote, "Let us envisage an exemplary and readily available case of, quote, psychic comportment, a concrete and natural perception, the perception of a chair which I find upon entering a room and push aside, since it stands in my way. I stress the latter in order to indicate that we are after the most common kind of everyday perception, and not a perception in the emphatic sense, in which we observe only for the sake of observing." So what Heidegger's saying here is he's trying to draw a distinction between two different kinds of perception. We have a natural, absorbed, pragmatic, pre-theoretical, very important, pre-theoretical perception. When you see the chair, it's in your way, so you push it out, right? You're trying to orient yourself. You're not perceiving for the sake of perceiving. And then we have the philosophical perception, which we'll get into. Natural perception, as I live in it in moving about my world, is for the most part not a detached observation and scrutiny of things, but is rather absorbed in dealing with the matters at hand concretely and practically. So the philosopher, when they say the chair, they, philosophically engage, what is the ontology of a chair? How does it apply to all chairs and all that stuff? Where Heidegger, at least in this example, just says, yeah, this is in my way, so I'm going to push it out. It is not self-contained. I do not perceive in order to perceive, but in order to orient myself, to pave the way in dealing with something. This is a wholly natural way of looking in which I continually live. So what he's describing is the way you live, being in the world, Dasein, this natural absorption or subsumption in the network of relations. A crude interpretation tends to depict the perception of the chair in this way. A specific psychic event occurs within me. To this psychic occurrence, quote-unquote, inside, in consciousness, there corresponds a physically real thing outside. A coordination thus arises between the reality of consciousness, the subject, and a reality outside of consciousness, the object. The psychic event enters into a relationship with something else inside of it. So this is the traditional rational understanding. We have all these psychic internal processes going on, and that's the subject, that's inside, and then outside we have all these objects coming into relationship with this internal consciousness, this internal subject. But in itself, it is not necessary for this relationship to occur, since this perception can be an illusion, a hallucination. It is a psychological fact that psychic processes occur in which something is perceived, presumably, which does not even exist. It is possible for my psychic process to be beset by hallucination, such that I now perceive an automobile being driven through the room over your heads. This is a lecture book. This is a book about his lectures. So when he says an automobile coming through the room, that's what he's talking about. It is possible for my psychic processes to be beset by a hallucination such that I now perceive an automobile being driven through the room over your heads. In this case, no real object corresponds to the psychic process in the subject. So the rationalists, they say, now this is interesting. Remember, we have the internal psychic subjects, things going on, and then we have the external real objects. But hallucination throws in some problems. In this case, we're talking about hallucinations, in this case, no real object corresponds to the psychic process in the subject. Here we have a perceiving without the occurrence of a relationship to something outside of it. Or consider the case of a deceptive perception. I am walking in a dark forest and see a man coming toward me, but upon closer inspection it turns out to be a tree. Here also the object supposedly perceived in this deceptive perception is absent. In view of these indisputable facts, which show that the real object can in fact be missing in perception, it cannot be said that every perception is the perception of something. So what he's saying is, well, actually, we'll finish this out. In other words, intentionality, being directed towards something, in other words, intentionality, directing itself towards something, is not a necessary mark of every perception. And even if some physical object should correspond to every psychic event which I call a perception, it would still be a dogmatic assertion, for it is by no means established that I ever get to a reality beyond my consciousness. So what he's saying is that what the rationalists are saying is that because hallucinations are a thing, and because we have all these inner psychic processes, and normally intentionality or being directed towards something happens when we have all these internal processes just kind of going about, and then it's sort of intruded upon by external real objects. But hallucination, so when I come in, I see the tree, right? But a hallucination says, no. I'm seeing this lecture hall and I'm seeing the students, but I'm hallucinating a car. The car does not have to be a real object for me to perceive it. So perception has little to do with external objects out here, and it's more an internal conscious process. So this is rationalism. This is getting way too lost in the clouds. This is denying the external world, getting way too lost in the strong I. And this is why John David Ebert says Heidegger has a good way of worlding. What does he call it? No, I can't remember. He says the rationalists, what they do is they de-world things in the world, and they put them in the abstract conceptualization where they become symbols, representations, images, mental images, stuff like that. This is nonsense. No, this is very interesting. This is very interesting what Heidegger is going to do here. Since Descartes, everyone knows, and every critical philosophy maintains, that I actually only apprehend contents of consciousness. So that's the main point there. If hallucinations are true, which they are, what sounds like a real object externally doesn't need to be perceived. And really, what I'm really getting at is my own consciousness, contents of my own consciousness. Accordingly, the application of the concept of intentionality to the comportment of perception, for example, already implies a double presupposition. First, there is the metaphysical presupposition that the psychic comes out of itself towards something physical. With Descartes, as everyone knows, this became a forbidden presupposition. Second, there is in intentionality the presupposition that a real object always corresponds to a psychic process. The facts of deceptive perception and hallucination speak against this. Again, I apologize for being a little repetitive. I just want to get this in your head. Because the hallucinations prove that no real object has to be there for something to be perceived, therefore the only thing that matters is the internal perceptive faculties, because who cares about it doesn't even have to be real, right? Okay. Now we're going to skip ahead a little bit because the rest is a little inside baseball. Let us recall the hallucination. It will be said that the automobile here is in reality not present and on hand. So it's a freaking hallucination, right? It's not actually here at the lecture hall. Accordingly, there is no coordination between physical and psychic. Only the psychic is given. Only the strong subject. Now, if you follow my Gebser series, you know this is textbook rationalism. Nonetheless, is not the hallucination in its own right a hallucination, a presumed perception of an automobile? Is it not also the case that this presumed perception, which is without real relationship to a real object, precisely as such is a directing itself towards something presumably perceived? Is not the deception itself as such a directing itself toward, even if the real object is in fact not there? So what the rationalists would say is that directionality, intentionality, being directed towards something, can only come about after a real object has been kind of perceived. But Heidegger is saying no. Even when a real object is gone, even when it's not there, like in the case of the hallucination of the car, direction and intentionality is still present and efficacious. So watch what he does to rework this. It is not the case that a perception first becomes intentional by having something physical enter into relation with the psychic, and that it would no longer be intentional if this reality did not exist. So we have, according to these two, neutral sense data, it comes in, and after the bundle of, well, hold on, let me pause, because I'm going to reread this whole paragraph because I made a mistake there. It is not the case that a perception first becomes intentional by having something physical enter into relation with the psychic, and that it would no longer be intentional if this reality did not exist. It is rather the case that perception, correct or deceptive, is in itself intentional. This is very important for later on. Intentionality is not a property which would accrue to perception and belongs to it in certain instances. As perception, it is intrinsically intentional, regardless of whatever the perceived is in reality on hand or not. Indeed, it is really only because perception as such is it directing itself towards something, because intentionality constitutes the very structure of comportment itself, that there can be anything like deceptive perception and hallucination. Thank you. Now, this is important. When all epistemological assumptions are set aside, it becomes clear that comportment itself, as yet quite apart from the question of its correctness or incorrectness, is in its very structure a directing itself toward. It is not the case that at first only a psychic process occurs as a non-intentional state, complex of sensations, memory relations, mental image, and thought processes through which an image is evoked, where one then asks whether something corresponds to it, and subsequently becomes intentional in certain instances. Rather, the very being of comporting is a directing itself toward. Intentionality is not a relationship to the non-experiential added to experiences, occasionally present along with them. Rather, the lived experiences themselves are such intentional. This is our first specification, perhaps still quite empty, but already important enough to provide the footing for holding metaphysical prejudices at bay. So let's reread that really quickly again. So what he says here is that it is not the case that at first only a psychic process occurs as a non-intentional state, complex of sensations, memory relations, mental image, all that stuff. So what these guys will say is that's what's happening. We have this consciousness and everything. We have these psychic processes that occur in a non-intentional state. And then once we receive input of an object, it's neutral. And then as it's being inputted, we sort of check it with all of our mental images, our memory, our complex, all that stuff, and then we make a judgment that that's a cat. That's what they're going to say. Heidegger's going to say no. When you direct it immediately, you know it's a cat. There is no neutral sense data. So, after that very long, which took way longer than I thought it would, I think it's necessary, though. Let's get right into it, huh?
I guess I don't know if I believe in real ethical obligations then, I guess, or if I could like objectively say like someone ought to have some sort of ethical obligation. For me, I firmly believe that like 99% of humans, just because we all come from roughly the same genetic stock, I think we have roughly the same fundamental preferences. I don't think there are groups of people that have huge differences like that. Now, there might be some that come out through like socializing or cultural stuff. So like maybe people's opinions on like LGBT issues, but on really fundamental stuff like should I be allowed to steal from you, rape you, kill you, attack you without provocation? I think for the most part, I think almost every like human being that is mentally sound and everything will agree on these things, I think.
Okay, so from a Gebser perspective, this is absurd, right? This is absolutely insane. This is a rationalist projection that everyone's in the mental consciousness structure, everyone's a rationalist, and we all agree with these things. Of course that's not true. Not only is it not true today, in contemporary 2026, it's not true throughout time. There are cultures that have sacrificed their fellow man to satisfy the gods. Don't tell me that we all agree. You even see this today in 2026, like when they investigate all that fraud and stuff. I think now that I think about it, I had a buddy who did, I think it was like humanitarian work in like the Congo or something like that. And he did his work, and he helped the people there, and they offered him like a bribe. And it wasn't that much, but they offered him a bribe. And of course, he has a very Western, like, no, that's breaking the rules. I don't want to do that. Respectfully decline kind of thing. You know what they said? They actually got offended. They were like, how dare you not try to help your tribe? This is what we do. This is how we help our tribe. You don't want to help your tribe? Is that what you're telling me? No, it's absolutely absurd that we all have the same thing. No, absolutely not. My moral desires and moral whatever are completely different from a Chinese dude from 9000 BC. It's just absurd on its face.
Arguably, this takes us back to where we started and saying that even the sort of the nationalists and the globalist and the the religious zealot and the atheist, like they still ultimately are motivated by something like, maximization of their own well-being or positive experience or something like this.
Yeah, everything depends on what that means, right? When you ask a Westerner, what is maximized? Like, hell, I mean, take the Ayn Rand objectivist rationalist types. They'll tell you economic prosperity, wealth, rights, freedom from government. That's nice, but when I go to the Middle East or when I go to India, these very spiritually involved cultures, they're not going to say that. And I'm not even saying they're necessarily wrong for saying that. They're going to say, no, we are carefully observing the teachings of God. We actively, Islam's a great example, actively deny your wealth because that's against God's teachings. So yeah, it's true that we're all looking out for ourselves and we all want to better our own way, but how do you do that?
In which case, we could say that there's some basic moral intuition that most people share. And the reason I wanted to ask you about that was because so much of what we think about the world is based essentially on unprovable intuition.
Yeah.
For example, the existence of the external world, the existence of other minds. Are you familiar with the problem of induction, for example?
Okay. All right. Do you remember what we just read? So I'm going to try my best to do this. It's going to be a little difficult, but we'll start with the easy one, the problem of induction. Well, if you watch my Kill Rationalism series, part 2 specifically, you know that rationality is limited, not only to the quantifiably measurable and the conscious known, but it's also limited to deduction. All men breathe. Socrates is a man. Socrates breathes. It's good logic. Socrates is a man. Socrates drowned in a river. All men will drown in a river. That is inductive logic, and that is bad logic. So logic works best with deduction, going from the general to the particular. When it goes from particular to general, we've got problems. So when you say the problem of induction, I know exactly what stance you're taking. That is the rational stance. Now, someone in Gebser's language, to put it in the mythical structure or the magical structure, would never view induction as a problem because that's what the heart does. Of course you should do this. Of course you should do X, do Y, do Z. The problem with those guys is they struggle with deduction. So they have a bunch of shoulds without the proper is, which is a big problem. But the problem with these guys is they can tell you what is, but they can't tell you what should. So that's number one. So the fact that they said that tells me I'm already dealing with rationalists. Number 2. So what I'm about to say doesn't necessarily decisively refute ultimate skepticism, but it does recontextualize what ultimate skepticism is, and in doing so it does undermine their claims a little bit. So the way ultimate skeptics work, and we'll say any skeptics, for example these guys, when they say neutral sense data, and I can't trust the world and I can't trust my senses, well, anytime you hear someone say the quote neutral sense data or sense data at all, what they're doing is they're philosophically reinterpreting an original primordial pre-theoretical experience. For example, I remember once we had a cat hanging around my house and my neighbors. And I asked my girlfriend if we could have it. She was like, no, I'm pregnant. We already have a massively obese cat as it is. Just no. I said, okay. So one day I was coming down my house, and sure enough, I turned the steps, and there it is, in my house. It must have snuck in somehow. And it scared the shit out of me. I recoiled. I was like, oh my God. All right, so what Alex and Destiny would say is that when I walked down the stairs and I turned and I perceived the cat, what really happened was I had all these internal consciousness processes, memories, mental images, conceptions, representations, images. And when I perceived the cat, as that sense data input came in, it sort of aligned with my understanding or mental image of a cat, and therefore I judged that a cat is true, and then that led to the reaction of me being scared. What Heidegger would say is that no, anytime you say sense data or anything like that, again, you are philosophically reinterpreting an original pre-theoretical experience. So what happened was, I turned, I registered the cat immediately. It had nothing to do with judgment or interpreting or anything like that. And its significance was co-present, which means in this case it was something to be recoiled from, something to be in danger of, something to freak out, right? So it's not neutral sense data. There is no neutral sense data. When you say, how do we know this cat is a cat? You already have an understanding of it as a cat. Now, I'm not saying you can't go into this theoretical world, because you can, but you're missing the point when you say, oh, everything is just neutral sense data. And if everything is neutral sense data and everything depends on me transposing my mental images on this object, well then, yeah, we could be wrong. Because of course, if everything is neutral sense data, then you only have abstractions. And if the abstractions misalign with the object you're perceiving, that's where skepticism comes in. Hopefully that was explained well enough. We'll dig into it further.
The fact that we can't, we have no reason to say that the laws of physics are not going to stop working in 5 seconds.
Yeah, the sun's not necessarily going to come up tomorrow or whatever, right? Yeah,
not according to
exactly.
rationality.
And this is the reason it's called the problem of induction is because it's essentially unsolvable. It might be solvable
According to rationality, yes, that is correct. Read John Gebser, yes.
with theism. That's kind of another discussion, but it's not a solvable problem. But we say we can recognize I have absolutely no way to justify objectively to somebody who disagrees with me that the external world exists, or that the sun will rise tomorrow, or that other minds exist, any of this stuff. But we still believe it, right? I presume you still believe these things.
Yeah.
Okay, so the reason why you're able to deny this at all is because the theoretical skepticism relies on a pre-theoretical assurance. So again, how do I want to attack this? Let me see if I can rewind just a second.
That the external world exists, or that the sun will rise tomorrow, or that other minds exist, any of this stuff. But we still believe it, right? I presume you still believe these things.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to have to get into Vorhanenite and Zuhanenite. So there are two different modes of being, or two different ways of experiencing the same thing. Anger is really a perfect example. So anger, the pre-theoretical mode of engagement, or mode of being in anger, is a tightening of chest, it's blood flowing, it's fists clenched, it's cheeks getting red, it's eyes focusing, right? Anger is not yet an object to be rationally analyzed or considered. It is not an object. That means certain aspects of its being are being revealed in the experience. But let's say you say something that pisses me off, and I start my chest starts tightening and the fists start clenching, all that stuff. But then, because I'm a mature adult, I realize, wait a second, I'm getting angry in the moment. Anger then has turned into an object to be represented in the world of abstract conceptualization. So one is experiential, one is abstract, one is lived, one is represented. These are not necessarily a bad thing, but what happens is, in turning anger into an object, what you're doing is you're fundamentally transforming the nature of that original experience into something else. So when I'm rationally considering anger, maybe in a state of calmness like right now, well, my chest isn't tightened and my fists aren't clenched. And when my chest is tightened and my fists are clenched, I'm not rationally considering anger, am I? So what you're doing, the point here, is that the theoretical, when you take the object out here and plug it into abstract conceptualization, you fundamentally transform the nature in which new facets or aspects of the being are concealed while others are being unconcealed. Now, what's being concealed? Well, obviously, that original pre-theoretical experience of anger. And what's being or did I say that's being concealed? Excuse me, I don't know if I misspoke. What's being unconcealed is all those mental aspects of anger. Okay, well, that's what it is. This is what it is. So there you go. So skepticism, what skepticism does, it tries to pretend that the pre-theoretical doesn't exist, and it only tries to get you to stick in the theoretical. So it's only trying to get you to stick in one particular mode of being. It's absolutely ridiculous. Take an example. Well, anger is a good example. Imagine if someone said that anger isn't really a thing and it was only a figment of your mind. No, of course not. You've experienced anger and you didn't think about it. There are tons of time when instead of you having anger, so to speak, anger had you. It's controlling you. There's no getting around it. Imagine, I heard Alex do a little game, a little philosophical game with someone else. They were talking about the philosophy of sports. It was a terrible video. And they were talking about Chelsea Football Club, the soccer team. And they were trying to figure out like what Chelsea is. You know, they were doing like this ship of Theseus thing, where is it the supporters, is it the players, is it the organization, is it the badge? And they couldn't really figure it out. First of all, it's all of that. But here's the point here, right? So if I ask Alex what Chelsea is, he's a philosopher, which means he's going to take the real world club out here, he's going to put it up here, and he's going to play that ship of Theseus game. But if I ask just a normal guy, or maybe a Chelsea fan, and I say, hey, what is Chelsea? They're going to know exactly what it is. Oh, it's a football club. This is what you do. He has a pre-theoretical understanding of what that is, just as the carpenter has a pre-theoretical understanding of what it means to be a carpenter. He's automatically absorbed in the network of relations. This is what Heidegger was talking about when he says, when I walk in and I see a chair and it's in my way, I push it out. I'm not perceiving for the sake of perception. I'm perceiving for the sake of orientation, of being in a world, not lost in the clouds like these guys are. So again, when skeptics say the earth or your sense data are completely unreliable, you remind them that their invocation of the word sense data or any of this is a philosophical reinterpretation after the fact. It would be like me driving a car to Arizona, poking a hole through the tires, stripping it for parts, pretending it didn't exist, and saying, wow, guys, look, I walked 3,000 miles to Arizona. Look how awesome I am. No. You are cutting off the branch that you're sitting on. It's ridiculous. Now, it doesn't decisively refute ultimate skepticism, because it doesn't decisively prove that the earth is real, but it does recontextualize the temporal unfolding of skepticism. There is no neutral sense data at all. You always have an understanding of what something is, even if it's not a strictly philosophical rational. And in doing so, well, if there's no neutral sense data and skepticism relies on neutral sense data, we've got a problem here.
And so if you're willing to allow unprovable intuitions in the case of general epistemology to allow you to say, well, I think it's objectively true that the Earth orbits the sun, even though that's based on sort of observations that rest on unprovable intuitions.
Again, they're only unprovable from a state of pure theory. When you combine theory with the pre-theoretical, they're not unproven at all. Think of a soccer game, right? When I played soccer growing up, when I played, I wasn't sitting around analyzing anything. Well, what is the exact curve of the ball, and how do I place my head to clear the ball? I'm not doing that. Okay, it's participatory, it's involved, it's instinctual, it's automatic, it's quick. I can imagine Alex sitting on the bench watching me play and just being like, what is this game? I guess we can never figure out what soccer is because, what is it, right? And we could always doubt what it's like. Yeah, I guess you could, but you're relying on, you already know what it is. You're just getting lost in the clouds.
Intuition that the external world exists and that your sense data is accurate, but you're just going to say, yeah, but I'm just going to trust it and say that because using that intuition, I see that the Earth orbits the sun, I'm going to say it's objectively true that the Earth orbits the sun. Why can't we just do the same thing for ethics in saying that, yeah, we have this unprovable intuition that sort of my well-being is good for me, or like maximization of positive experience is a good thing. And through that unprovable intuition, I see that murder is wrong. And so I'm just going to say that murder is objectively wrong. It's as true to say that murder is wrong as it is to say that the Earth orbits the sun. If you're going to dismiss one because there's no way to sort of resolve the fundamental conflict to someone who disagrees with you, that's true of like all epistemology.
Yeah. Okay, so...
Let me rewind just a second. I want to make sure I got what he...
Why can't we just do the same thing for ethics in saying that, yeah, we have this unprovable intuition that sort of even though that's based on sort of observations that rest on unprovable intuitions, it's just an intuition that the external world exists and that your sense data is accurate, but you're just going to say, yeah, but I'm just going to trust it and say that because using that intuition, I see that the Earth orbits the sun, I'm going to say it's objectively true that the Earth orbits...
Okay, we got a problem here. First of all, again, the unproven intuitions thing, the faith or trust you have in the pre-theoretical is pre-theoretical. It's got nothing to do with theory. So the unproven is from the state of pure theory, divorced from pre-theoretical. Why would you do that? That's number one. Number two, the objectivity of the, back in the day, it would be the sun revolving the earth. When we say something is objectively true in 2026, usually we're referencing science or rationality, or maybe if you're based in irrationality. Either way, we're not referencing just pure intuition. Science is what tells us that gravity is real. Intuition helps, but intuition can be wrong, as exemplified by the Ptolemaic understanding of the cosmos. Of course, Copernicus, with rationality and science, with rationality and science, completely flipped this on his head. But the point is, intuitively, it may be understanding that everything revolves around us, because that's seemingly the way the earth is set, and that's seemingly just kind of the way we exist. But Copernicus said, of course not. No, look, we have science here, and you're wrong, and we're not the center of the universe. Okay, well, these are two completely different epistemologies we're using here. So he's on one hand he's saying he's leaning on objectivity when it comes to intuition in the moral domain, but when it comes to factual scientific domain, he's leaning on objectivity of science and rationality. So it's just a mismatch here, and we're going to explain why there's a problem here.
It's the sun. Why can't we just do the same thing for ethics in saying that, yeah, we have this unprovable intuition that sort of my well-being is good for me, or like maximization of positive experience is a good thing. And through that unprovable intuition, I see that murder is wrong. And so I'm just going to say that murder is objectively wrong. It's as...
Sure, because one is quantifiably measurable and consciously known. The other is quantifiably immeasurable and oscillates between consciously known and unknown. I can put my phone on the table, which means I can rationally measure it. It is a spatialized object. Really not much to say. I can't put honor and justice on the table. I can't put loyalty and degradation on the table. So therefore, our epistemological understanding of it is just fundamentally different. You're asking, what essentially what he's asking right now is, why is there a discrepancy between the mind and the heart? Well, these do two separate things. They do two separate functions. One helps with the immeasurable, the heart, obviously, the soul, psyche, values, qualitative evaluation, subjectivity, all that stuff. The other one helps with external space and logic, quantifiably measurable and consciously known. The directed, the spatial, the triangular thought form is a fundamental misunderstanding that's happening. And he is a rationalist. It's obvious to see where this rationalism is coming in. He's exclusively on the quantifiably measurable and consciously known. Now he's employing it in an area where it simply doesn't belong. In this case, immorality. This is why I made that, I think it was a Kill Rationalism Part 3, I talked about how rationalists really kind of destroy morality. He already admitted the problem with rationalist morality. It's the problem of induction. And all of morality is induction. I mean, obviously the is and the deduction is important. But like really what we're getting, the content of morality is about induction. And he already admitted at the beginning of this video that rationality has a problem with induction. Alex, I think, really struggles with the measurable and the known aspect, because I saw him have a discussion with Konstantin Kisin. And he was making the argument, well, if I were to knowingly call Alex let's say a rapist, right? Obviously this is a lie. I have no evidence, let alone proof of that. Obviously I'm just making things up. But let's say Alex is a very smart guy, very popular guy. Let's say he has a $500,000 book deal that he's going to have with a particular publisher. Well, I call him a rapist. It actually goes kind of viral, and then of course the publisher pulls that. And then he says, well, okay, we have laws going kind of against the principles of free speech in this instance, when what I said about Alex caused a harm and incurred a cost on Alex, so now I have to make whole on that and against the principles of free speech. So he takes that logic and he applies it essentially to hurt feelings. He's saying, look, you said something that incurred a cost or caused a harm in me, and you had to make whole from the law. Why can't we do that with people being offended? And what I would remind Alex is that the $500,000 in our example is quantifiably measurable and consciously known. I can't validate in the same way that I can validate scientific rational things your internal state. It's just not possible. It's like when people in economics, they say, well, don't you think people should get paid based on whether they're a good person or not? Even if I were to grant this entirely delusional, fantastical thing, we don't know how to do that. So it's almost a moot point. He really struggles, and I think Constantine got the best of him in that argument.
It's wrong. It's as true to say that murder is wrong as it is to say that the Earth orbits the sun. If you're going to dismiss one because there's no way to sort of resolve the fundamental conflict to someone who disagrees with you, that's true of like all epistemology.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe you can maybe you can solve this one for me, because do you know who perspective philosophy is?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I think he's tried to get me on this argument before, and we have trouble getting much farther, either because my mind's not equipped or because I'm just so correct and I don't realize it. Okay. So maybe you can help me sort this out. So first let me summarize your argument so you can tell me if I understand this correctly. So I'm saying, well, ultimately, there is no such thing as moral fact. We can't prove that moral fact, so it's silly to pretend like you can make objectively true moral statements. And then you'll say, okay, sure, that might be the case. However, if we look at things like the problem of induction, or if we look at even the manifestation of other minds in the world, you can't prove that any of that exists. However, you don't go through life being like an epistemic agnostic or anti-realist. You don't go through life assuming that, tomorrow the planet's going to explode. Like, you go through life assuming these things are objectively true. So why would you grant one for like metaphysics or epistemology, but you wouldn't do the same for ethics? Is that essential?
Sure. So one is the reason why you wouldn't worry about the world blowing up is because, again, you are being in the world, Dasein. You are automatically absorbed in the network of relations. A pre-theoretical mode of being, a purely theoretical mode of being, will never, ever, ever be able to encompass the entirety of human existence, just as a purely pre-theoretical understanding of being will never be able to understand the entirety of human existence. The faith that we have on our senses and our sense data, it's not arbitrary, and it only seems as faith from the perspective of pure theory, but we're not purely theoretical beings. So this ultimate skepticism is nonsense.
Essentially, kind of the question. Right?
And to be clear, it's not just. I think it's a little bit stronger. It's not just that you don't go around like acting, as if these things aren't true. You sort of act as if the external world exists. You act as if other minds are true. That's true, but I think it's stronger that you believe that it's true that other minds exist as well. Right? It's not just that you act as if that's the case. You believe that I'm a real person talking to you right now, right? And that is based upon, let's say, if I were to run this argument, you might say that is based on as justifiable an intuition as any moral intuition that you could think of.
Okay.
I don't know if I agree with that. Because again, one is kind of measurable and one can be empirically verified and the other kind of can't. I can see my girlfriend and my daughter every day. I can't really see my sense of loyalty. I can't really, it's just a fundamental, I don't think this is a good argument.
So we'll see if you can get me over this hurdle. So my big issue when it comes to things like these, there's a lot of stuff we'll argue about, and then it'll boil down to this one point. I feel like it's resolving disagreements between people that point me in a direction of something that I'm more comfortable standing on solid ground on. So, so for instance, when it comes to like existence of external universe or something, I can talk to a lot of other people and we can have agreements and disagreements on these things, but ultimately it seems like if there are 4 people standing in a circle and 3 people are saying, I think that the earth is round, and another guy saying, I think the earth is flat, we can run a battery of tests, we can take in all the sense data, and eventually our minds can come to some agreement because of our ability to interact with the external world and say, well, look, actually, we are correct. Right? The world is spherical, and the 4th guy, you were just wrong. You can think what you want, but you're wrong. However, if 4 people were to stand in a circle and 3 were to say murder is wrong, and the other guy say, well, I think murder is okay, it feels like there's no possible thing that you could appeal to or look at or ever have a discussion about to resolve that disagreement. I don't know how you would do it. Yeah.
I think that doesn't work.
Interesting. Yeah, so I think actually Alex's point he's about to make is interesting. How do I want to hit this? So I guess I would remind that person who denied that the earth was round, and if they are this sort of ultimate skeptic, that they, kind of like I said earlier, your skepticism is after the fact. So before, just kind of remind them of their mode of being before that. To be like, what was Earth like before that? When it wasn't, you weren't overanalyzing anything and denying the existence of everything. So let's say Destiny's example. Let's say we have 4 people in the jungle, right? And these guys are arguing about Destiny's little hypothetical here. And let's say we're walking in the jungle, we're walking in the forest, and suddenly a giant branch comes. And I turn, and I go, oh, and I duck. And I miss the branch, right? So I'm the person who's denying that the earth is round, but I missed the branch. So what happened here, right? Pre-theoretically, I engage with the branch. I didn't theoretically, 1, I wasn't nitpicking its ontology. 2, I wasn't calculating the curvature and the velocity and the speed of the branch and the weight and how much that's going to hurt me and all that stuff. I wasn't doing any of that. Rather, the object was there, the branch, not neutral sense data, not a bundle of impressions, the branch, and its significance. In this case, it would be something to be avoided, something to be, to recoil from, to duck from. That person who is like an ultimate skeptic will go through that experience, and then after that experience, will look back and reflect and go, well, was that really a branch? And how do I? And now here comes the skepticism. So anytime you see this, you remind them that, well, you can be as skeptical as you want, but you're relying on an anti-skepticism to make that skeptical argument.
Okay, tell me why. I think because in the situation that people disagree about something like the shape of the Earth or that the Earth exists, let's say, this might be based upon some fundamental conflict. Let's say that I said to you, like, I don't believe that the moon exists, right? And you sort of said, but look, I mean, can't you see it? Like, can't you, like, haven't you heard, haven't you seen like the photographs? Can't you see it at night? And I say, well, actually, yes, I can, but you're not getting me. What I'm saying is I have a more fundamental skepticism that my sense data is accurate.
So my sense data is inaccurate, and yet my sense data is accurate enough to know that I don't believe the moon exists. I don't believe the moon exists, and yet I already have a pre-theoretical understanding of what the moon is that is derived from the senses, and yet my senses aren't good enough. I mean, think about what he's saying. I'm not saying Alex is saying this. I'm saying he's obviously referencing someone else's voice. But the person he's talking about, they're saying the moon doesn't exist. You already have an understanding of what that moon is. My point is, when you say the moon doesn't exist, how is it possible that it could be the moon and neutral sense data at once? Which one is it? Neutral sense data is a philosophical reinterpretation after the fact. Remember, not space and time, space-time. The temporal unfolding of things in space inform those spatial objects. It's just ridiculous.
I think we're living in a simulation or something like that.
Oh, okay.
If we disagree that the moon exists, there is no test you can run to disprove that, so long as that's what my belief is based upon. Because you could say, well, look, let's get a telescope. Let's look in the telescope. And I'll look in the telescope and I'll be like, yeah, I see the same thing as you. There it is. There's the moon. There's the Sea of Tranquility. But I still don't believe it's there, because more fundamentally, I don't think my sense data is accurate. Sure. I don't think there's an external world, right? In the same way, if you have moral disagreements, let's say you're pro-gay marriage and someone else is anti-gay marriage, and you say, right, no, we can sort this out.
All right, I think we'll end it there. Hopefully this was somewhat interesting. Hopefully I explained it in a decent way. And let me know what you guys think. I'd prefer if you're cool in the comments, but you don't have to be. And I love you guys. I will see you soon. And if you're new, I would love if you stuck around. You guys are the best. And I will see you soon. New Gebser coming soon. Don't worry. Bye-bye.